Erev Tov, everybody. I'd like to thank David Fried for sponsoring this video on Parsha Shemini, and it's commemorating the Yortzeit of his brother, Michael ben Moshe Yitzchak, that he should have Aliyah Began Eden, amongst other things, in the schut of the Divrei Torah in the video. So we're starting over here now after Pesach. It's the custom to between on Shabbatot, Mincha, before Suda Shlishit, after Mincha, to recite pirkei avot. And what I wanted to do was wanted to make some introductory comments on pirkei avot. The first thing is to understand why is pirkei avot, more accurately Masechet Avot, which means fathers. Why is Masechet? Why is it called the Masechet, the tractate of the fathers? There's two very interesting, amongst many commentaries on why it's called so. The first one is that the Masechet Avot, it deals with basically the philosophical, ethical, moral teachings of Judaism. And the people who are mentioned in Masechet Avot, they were called by that name. They were called fathers. We know that there are other passages in the Talmud in which, for example, Hillel and Shammai were referred to as avot olam, the fathers. And therefore, it's called the Masechet, the tractate of the fathers. In other words, referring to the Tanaim and Amoraim, the Tanaim, who in the Mishnah, who are called fathers. The Gra says a very, very interesting comment that it's called fathers, avot, because anything that is to do with the Torah is called avot, fathers. In other words, that which is the most original. For example, on Shabbat, we refer to Lamed Tet Avot. We refer to 39 types of melacha, of work, which we're not allowed to do. And we refer to those basic categories as 39. There are subcategories of works that we're not allowed to do. They are called todot, the offspring. But something which has got a Torah basis to it, we call it original, we call it avot. And therefore, the point of Masechet Avot is to tell us that all these teachings about ethics, about morality, about outlook, about personal development, there's so many, all the people of the world have come up with all sorts of theories and psychology and all sorts of behavior patterns, etc. And the whole point of pirkei avot is to tell us that, you know what, everything that is written in this tractate of avot, at all original source in the Torah. In other words, this is not something that we can just, each one just makes up in and of itself, of himself, but we are stressing that even these ethical teachings, I mean, it goes out to say, saying Shabbat, Tefillin, Lashon Hara, all these things that obviously you need a source in Torah, but even when it comes to these moral maxims and teachings, they also have to be rooted, and they are rooted in coming from the Torah, and therefore it's called avot. Now, why is it called pirkei avot? Chapters of why do we call it as pirkei avot? I mean, it's really Masechet Avot. In order to understand this, we have to notice a tremendous novelty concerning this Masechet, this tractate of Avot. The novelty is, and the history of it was that it was incorporated into the Siddur. Unlike all the other tractates in the Torah, we don't have tractates which were incorporated as part of the Tefillah, part of the Siddur. But when it comes to Avot, Masechet Avot, it was incorporated, and we'll see why. And then we'll also be able to understand why it's called Pirkei Avot. Now, it was incorporated into the Siddur for and Dafka on after Mincha of Shabbat for this following reason. We've got conflicting traditions of when Moshe Rabbeinu died. According to the tradition that he passed away on Shabbat, and he basically passed away on Shabbat afternoon. So the Gemara, Masechet Moed Katan, says that then when there is the leader of the generation which passes away, like Moshe Rabbeinu, so then what we have to do is no one learns at that stage. We close the yeshivot and the Beit Midrash as a sign of mourning at the time that the person who was a leader of a generation passed away. In other words, we close his yeshiva and we, so to speak, mourn for the loss of this leader of the generation. So since that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbat, so therefore we, so to speak, close the Beit HaMidrash, we observe sort of mourning, and we don't learn things which are mamash in depth. But what we do is we learn in the form of like reciting a tefillah. So therefore, it was incorporated in the Siddur. So what we've explained now is, we've explained why do we learn pirkei avot on Shabbat. We learn it on Shabbat because according to one tradition, I am stressing that according to one tradition, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbat. And in order to fulfill the dictum and the requirement that when a leader of a generation passes away, then we limit the type of our learning. So therefore, we took something which was relatively more simpler. It's not something which is so intricate, like the laws of Shabbat and the laws of Torts and Baba Kama. We can learn it. We can almost daven it, right? And therefore, this became part of learning avot during this time that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. And with that, we'll understand why it's also called pirkei avot. There was one tradition that at the time there were various minagim. Some people learned pirkei avot between Pesach and Shavuot, and some people between Pesach and Rosh Hashanah. So according to there was a tradition that those who learned, let's say, between Pesach and Shavuot, they would learn the entire pirkei avot every Shabbat. And then afterwards, another minhag came that they set aside each one of the prakim in order to learn leading up to Shavuot. And then, hence it was called pirkei avot, chapters of avot, where every single week leading up to Shavuot, one of those chapters were recited. And why did we recite now these chapters? Okay, we recite them now. We've explained now what the connection, why we learn pirkei avot on Mincha of Shabbat. But why Dafka? Because again, to remind us of that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away at that time. But why is it that we chose to learn it Dafka between Pesach and Shavuot? And there's two reasons. Basic reason is because pirkei avot starts off, or Masechet Avot starts off with Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. So in our lead from Pesach to Shavuot, we are now preparing ourselves to accept the Torah. So then what we do is we stress, number one, the source of the Torah. We strengthen this pillar, this foundation, which is so basic to Judaism, that there is Torah Sheba'al Peh, that there is the oral law, and the one who gave us the Torah and its oral law is Moshe Rabbeinu. That's how Masechet Avot starts. It says Moshe accepted the Torah from Sinai and he transmitted it to Yoshua, etc. So what we're doing is between Pesach and Shavuot, we are speaking about the importance, the pillar of the acceptance of the Torah and the transmission of the teachings of the Torah. That's why we do it Dafka now. So we're doing many things at the same time. We're amending Moshe Rabbeinu, Masechet Avot also speaks about Moshe Rabbeinu Ezra. And then what we're also doing is, because we are learning about ethical and moral and the hashkafot, the yirat shamayim and the outlook that a person has to have, we are actually saying something else as well. That is, in order to accept the Torah has to be absorbed and be based on people's development of a good personality. The Torah only becomes part and only can lie and can be absorbed by a person who is a moral, ethical, and spiritual person. And to that degree, what we do is that we prepare ourselves for Matan Torah by reading these dictums and these sayings of our avot, and hence the inyan of pirkei avot. So this is just some of the things that I would just add on, just in conclusion, that when we stressed about the importance of Moshe accepting the Torah and passing it on from generation to generation, the truth of Torah Shebaal Peh, I would say that, I haven't seen it so far, but I would imagine that part of that is also against the Tzedukim. The Tzedukim, for example, said that the Sfirat HaOmer always starts off on Sunday, and Shavuot is 50 days from Sunday. And Chachamim, when it says in the Torah, Usvartim lachem mimochorat Shabbat, Shabbat doesn't mean Shabbat, the seventh day. Shabbat means Yom Tov. And therefore, this is why also between Pesach and between Shavuot, when we speak about Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, we emphasize the fact about that the Torah is all about the importance of our traditions, of how Moshe Rabbeinu transferred these traditions to Am Yisrael, and without that, there's no really Torah. So, in short, what we spoke about was the name of Masechet Avot. We spoke about why it's called chapters of Avot. We spoke about why was Masechet Avot taught, or that it's learned always on Shabbat Mincha, because of the passing away of Moshe Rabbeinu. And why is it that when we learn about Masechet Avot, we learn it specifically between Pesach and between Shavuot? Zat Hashem, these are just opening remarks that our learning of Masechet Avot should enable us to be able to accept the Torah, B'yirat Shamayim with V'lev Shalem. Shabbat Shalom to all.